Hey everybody, it's Dr. Jonny Bowden, and today I'm going to explain what the carnivore diet is. Now it's funny, when I wrote the book Living Low Carb back in 2004, I kind of introduced people to low carb diets and what they were all about. And one of the things I used to say all the time is, when we talk about low carb diets, we're not talking about no carb diets. We're talking about, controlled carbohydrate eating, getting your carbs from the right sources like fruits and vegetables, and not eating pasta and rice and all the starchy stuff. And, I kept explaining that there really aren't any no carb diets. But when we did the revised edition of Living Low Carb, which will be out in January of 2020, I had to change that statement, because there now is a no-carb diet, and it's called the carnivore diet. And it is actually a no-carb diet. It's a diet that consists of all meat. That's right, all meat, 24/7, all the time. Now, this is the thing. It's not quite as crazy as it sounds. Back in the 20s, there was a very famous explorer named Stephenson who actually went to the Arctic, and he lived among the Inuit. And vegetables don't even grow up there. I mean, they eat walrus meat and seal fat, and that's pretty much it, and fish. And he lived on the diet of the Inuit, and he felt better than he ever had in his life. And he felt healthy, and he came back and he told all these American doctors about it, and of course they said that's impossible. And they did an experiment with this guy. Actually, it was a 2-person experiment. They put them in a metabolic ward. I believe it was in Bellevue. I wrote about it in Living Low Carb. Kept him in there for quite a number of months and monitored everything. And as long as he ate meat with enough fat, he was great. All his blood levels were terrific. His aerobic capacity was great. He was in terrific health, and he was monitored by a team of 9 doctors. So there is some precedent to this notion that you can live on an all-meat diet. What I think makes us crazy about it, even me, what makes us nervous about it, and I'm pretty much a supporter of low carb, and I think that meat from healthy sources like grass-fed meat, 100% grass-fed meat, is a health food. But even I get a little nervous. I think, what about the fiber and the vegetables and all that stuff? And interestingly enough, the biggest advocate for the carnivore diet, the guy who is most associated with it, if you go on Twitter, you'll see him all over the place, is Dr. Shawn Baker. Now, Shawn Baker looks like if the Incredible Hulk and The Rock had a baby, it would be Dr. Shawn Baker. He's like 6'5", he's solid muscle, and he's in amazing shape, and he's an MD. And he's been on this diet for a long time. And he posts his blood work on Twitter. You can see it. He posts his blood work. And I interviewed him. I interviewed all these guys, and I did an interview for him for a membership site. And I asked him about it. And I said, what about the fiber? And he said, well, all I can tell you is look at the blood work. And I go, well, what about your triglycerides? What about this? What about the vitamins and nutrients? He says, I have every one of these tested, and they're all superb. Look at them. And Dr. Baker's got this following of people who are doing that, and a lot of those guys and women are MDs, and they're putting their blood work online as well. So none of this is like to say there's a scientific study on this, but it is to say that maybe this isn't quite as crazy as it sounds. After all, when you think about it, what's the number one reason when I say an all-meat diet, most people will go, what are you, nuts? Cholesterol and saturated fat. Well, both those hypotheses are going on the garbage dump heap of scientific hypotheses. We now know saturated fat does not increase the risk of death, and cholesterol doesn't cause heart disease. So those 2 reasons for being afraid of meat are really not valid anymore, at least theoretically. Now, you could argue that most meat in America is contaminated, it's factory farmed, it's full of antibiotics and steroids and hormones and sprayed crops from the grain that they have to eat, which isn't their natural diet. You could make that argument. I do make that argument, and that's one reason I don't like to recommend an all-meat diet to most Americans, because that's the kind of meat they're going to be eating. However, if you're going to do this, and you did it with 100% grass-fed beef and other sources of good protein, like wild salmon and stuff like that, it's not quite as nuts as it sounds. I take a little bit more of a middle of the road position. I mean, even with a keto diet, which is extremely low carbs, you can still have, 20 to 50 grams of green vegetables a day. And even though there are some doctors who say we don't need no fiber, we don't need no stinking fiber, these really, really strong keto advocates who I've discussed this with, and they think fiber is overrated. I'm not quite so sure. There's just so many studies showing that healthy people eat more fiber. So I'm not ready to give up on the fiber part of it yet. But I definitely think that I hope that the whole notion of a carnivore diet has gotten people a little bit more enlightened about the fact that meat, if it comes from a good source, a good healthy source, humanely raised, without antibiotics, without steroids, without hormones, can be a very, very healthy food, both hormonally, for your blood sugar, for your insulin response, and for a lot of other things. And enough people are putting their blood work on to confirm that I think you're going to be hearing more and more about this diet. It's not quite as nuts as it might sound. This is Dr. Jonny, and if you like this video, please hit that little like thing and subscribe so you can hear more of my outrageous opinions as I put them up here on this channel.